Right, 2 days to go in the most consequential Victorian election in a generation. To date, a record 1.3 million Victorians have voted. It's almost a quarter of the electorate, which just shows how desperate people are to make their voices heard. With a rap sheet as long as his arm in a decade, so says my next guest, Premier Andrews has turned Victoria into his own secretive autocracy. Joining me now, former Victorian Premier Jeff Kennett. Well, Jeff, it's about 11 minutes to midnight. People are voting. We've got obviously the showdown over the next 2 days and a decision, we hope, on Saturday night. You're watching it all play out. What makes Daniel Andrews such a divisive political figure, and what about his record?
Peter, good evening. I think, as I said, we've moved from the traditional form of the Westminster system being applied by the government of the day to one of autocracy. And this hasn't just happened in the last 2 or 3 years. It started with the red shirts 8 years ago. So there has been a continual program, re-emphasised from time to time, during the hotel quarantine issue, when the Premier and all his ministers and public servants said they can't remember who authorised the employment of the New South Wales security people. And then there's a number of personal issues surrounding the Premier. So I think that the public are upset. I think they're thinking, do we want more of the same? Even if you think back to my government, to John Brumby's, to Steve Brack's, regardless of our politics in those days and differences of policy, we lived the Westminster system. We actually took responsibility for what we did, and we respected the rules and laws of the day. Sadly, Daniel hasn't done that. So there are two aspects. This isn't an election, in my opinion, between Labor, the Coalition and independents. This is a referendum on Daniel Andrews and a referendum on what we Victorians want of our government for the next 4 years. First point. Second point is, for any of your viewers who are between the ages of 18 and 40, they are the ones who are going to have to bear the burden of the financial inheritance that Daniel Andrews has built up. So it's gone from $5 billion when we left office in '99 to now approaching $200 billion. And Daniel says we'll be back in surplus in a couple of years. That is not correct. We are going to be in deficit for a long time. The debt will grow, and that will affect those in that age group 18 to 40. Now, they are often thought of as Labor supporters. I say to them tonight, you've got to think about your future, living here in Victoria, and trying to manage this debt that is so large that it's going to affect the quality of services for years to come. So this, as you said, is a very important election. The people are deciding already. I am quietly hopeful, confident that Victorians will say enough's enough. This is not the man that we can entrust our government, our state to for another 4 years.
It's funny, the remarks you just made there about this not being a left-right election, it's about the standard you're prepared to accept in government, and that this is crossing a Rubicon if you re-elect someone like Daniel Andrews. That's what came back to me as I was putting together my documentary from union leaders and Labor insiders. For them, it wasn't about ideological politics anymore. It was about the personality and the dogma, I suppose, of a political leader. Look, it's clear there's a swing on. The question is, how big is that swing, and if it's going to come in time to change the government, given the task there for the Liberals, the margins in many of these seats. What is interesting is the huge number of undecideds. There's about at least a quarter, perhaps close to a third of the electorate that are undecided, and wherever they break will determine the fate of the government on Saturday night. Where do you think it's going to go? I mean, and I want to ask you about the undecideds. The fact that people haven't made up their mind, what does that tell you?
Tells me they're ready to express a view that they haven't been expressing to date. And it'll come down to this issue: more Daniel, less Daniel. It'll also be a fascinating night, as you know, because we've now had the death of a candidate in the seat of Narrabeen. And that repeats what happened to us in 1999. We had a candidate die on election day. We won the most seats that night. there were 3 independents, but the election could not be determined until we had a by-election a month later. Now, it's quite possible on Saturday night that there will be no clear result. And in fact, we'll have to wait until the by-election in Arakan takes place a month after. We may be governorless for a month. I think I've been out to a lot of polls over the last few weeks. And one woman, I just repeat her experience in expressing it to me. She said, I have never, ever voted Liberal in my life. And I'm not voting Liberal today, but I can't stand Premier Andrews any longer. And I'm voting against him. It's the first time I've ever voted against the Labor Party. Now, that was a very mature lady. She came, she expressed a view, moved on. I'm seeing a lot of that around the booths. As you asked me the question, how relevant? Where's that expression going to be and what seats? To be quite honest, Peter, we won't know until Saturday night.
Talk to me about the SEC. It's been a big issue in this campaign. The Premier wants people to think that he's recreating the SEC, but he's not. And he's not being honest either about Labor's role in selling off the giant Loy Yang power station either, are they?
No, they're not, but they've always had double standards. This is where I say this government doesn't practice the Westminster system of government. It practices its own, and it's not telling the truth on a whole number of issues. Let me say this. They wouldn't be running the issue unless they've done a lot of polling and they believe a lot of people believe that recreating something is of good value. What they haven't spelled out to us is what it actually means, a new SEC. Wind, solar. What it doesn't, and they haven't explained, they thought they were going to get 49% of the total cost, whatever it may be, from the superannuation funds. But there is no way a superannuation fund board will entrust the government of Victoria to develop a new energy company when the companies they're already involved in are either so late on delivery and so expensive in terms of the original cost. And a superannuation fund has got to act in the interests of its members. Why would you, for God's sake, give an Andrews government money from your and my super fund to be invested in an organisation where they have so many examples of where they have totally failed to manage?
Hey, just a quick one. I know you watched him closely. Ian Cook, do you reckon he can be the lion killer out in Mulgrave?
I'm praying. It is the most extraordinary campaign in Mulgrave. In the federal election, the Teals got a lot of emotional support. In their uniforms, people came from everywhere. That's not appearing at any electorate that I've been to, except in Mulgrave. Now, Ian Cook has got not only donations flowing in from everywhere, which is funding his campaign, he's also getting people out there, Peter. So I know of a very conservative family living in the eastern suburbs, never been involved in politics. The wife has been out there every day and will be there on Saturday. He has got an energy out there that we've not seen. Now, he's still got to win about 8.5%. It's a big swing, but it is possible, and I lay you a small bet that you and I will be watching that seat very, very closely on Saturday night.
Oh, I'm going to get out there on Saturday. I want to talk about Mulgrave Saturday night, but I want to get out there on the ground in the morning if I can. Jeff, thank you. Thank you as always. Jeffrey Kennett there, former Liberal Premier of Victoria.